and blessings, beautiful Coven of the Witch Weaver. How are you today? I sincerely hope that you are doing amazingly. It is a very rainy Monday today. The fire is going because it's about 4 degrees and I can't feel my fingertips. But nevertheless, we are going to discuss today's topic, which was requested, and that is protection magic. We are going to be talking protection magic, folks, and let us get stuck in. So, there are some things to consider when we're looking at protection magic. First and foremost, protection magic is an umbrella term to describe 2 different approaches to magic. One is passive protection, the other is active protection. Passive protection magic is preventative in nature. It is the thing that we do when we're preventing particular things from taking place. In the same way that we lock our doors and we lock our cars, we set our alarms, we, take security measures on our behalf. Protection magic is an extension of that in the spiritual. So we would do things to our home, we would do things to our car, we would do things to our spiritual possessions or our physical possessions. We would do things to protect, say, our loved ones, talisman magic, things of that nature. So we're extending little nets or little bubbles of protection out onto that which we value, our home, our car, our personal effects, loved ones, and all of that type of thing. And that is passive in nature. It is something that we can all do and that we all should do. Now, preventative protection magic, i.e. passive protection magic, is something that requires upkeep. Eventually it becomes part of metaphysical maintenance. So what I'm talking about here is we, circle the perimeter with a mix of, say, salt, tourmaline, cloves, rose, other things that would make a nice little mix, and then you would pour it all around the perimeter of your home. Get to the front door, you sprinkle a protection powder underneath the floor mat of your home. You walk in the threshold of your door, which will be anointed with protection oil. You will walk into the door. Above the door, there's always some kind of a sigil. Now, if you have the capacity to hang something up there, that's great. If not, you can use your protection oil to draw an invisible sigil or a command above the door and also on the floor. In the home itself, you have deposits of protective powders and salts in the 4 corners. And of course, then you would have, crystal grids in place. You would have charmed brooms and charmed dustpans and charmed waters for your mop, for instance. So little liquids that you could put in your mopping bucket when you are doing your home. You would have cleansing blends and purifying blends as far as smoke cleansing and purification goes. And you would have baths and spiritual waters in effect to anoint the body and to protect and to cleanse and to clear. So these are just some very basic examples of passive protection magic, but all of those require regular upkeep. Eventually the perimeter circle that you have anointed or sprinkled with your protection powder, it will need to be redone. And likewise, the anointing of the threshold, powders underneath the front door mat, any charms that you have in place will need to be fed, re-anointed, and redone, likewise within the home. And so these are things that require regular upkeep, and it's good to be on top of that, that type of upkeep. So I'm talking about every 3 months for the majority of it, but I like to do my thresholds, which are very, very busy places, and my doormats every month at least, during the new moon, or on the approach to the new moon, so we can enter that new moon with all this fresh kind of preventative magic in place. So it's really, really good to do that type of thing. Now, that is more preventative magic. There is a type of preventative magic that has to it longevity. It's the only one that I know that truly, truly contains longevity. It falls under the category of apothropaic magic, and that is the infamous witch's bottle. I have for you in the description of this video a nice little blog post and a recipe for a very basic witch's bottle. But a witch's bottle is something that you would make and you would bury in the perimeter of your home, and it would stay there for all of time. So as long as that bottle is in the ground, you existing in that place is something that that will be guarded. Now, the idea behind apothecaric magic is that it is concealed protection that has no expiration date on it, okay? It cannot be found, which is why it is so effective. Only you know where you've buried it. And that's what makes it a really, truly beautiful thing. And so one of those things to consider if you are setting down roots in a place is to have that witch's bottle in the ground, because that will start everything off really well. It's marking your territory with a witch's bottle. There's a level of respect there. It speaks to nature, and it also speaks to the spirituality and the world of spirit in humanity. And so very, very potent act of magic. And it's very fun to make as well. But it does require privacy, and it does require nighttime, and it does require a good moon and all of that kind of good fun stuff. But it is something to consider. If you cannot, or if you're not in a position to use a witch's bottle in burying in your property, and you don't yet own property, then you can get yourself a nice big pot plant and make a very small version of that witch's bottle to put in that pot plant. Likewise, you can utilize plant magic to protect your home. And so you can grow plants from seed, blessing the seed, anointing the seed, blessing the seed, stating your intention, activating that seed in a similar way to what you would when you were activating a crystal, and putting that into some beautiful soil and nurturing it to grow. Its growth will be specific to your needs, right? So if you plant, say, rosemary in a pot plant by your door, rosemary is naturally protective, but with you instilling that intention in rosemary, it's going to grow in such a powerful way because it has inherent intention and belief there. Likewise, lavender. You can plant these beautiful plants by your door and allow them to serve as protective aids. So very, very interesting way to use plants. There's many, many other ways that we can use plants in magic, and it's beautiful to do so. If you would like to increase the spirituality in your home, an African violet will do just nicely. If you want to create a sense of peace and passivity in your home, then a peace lily is a beautiful thing. Orchids will add beauty, and there are so many different beautiful attributes to plants to consider. So that's a little passive plant magic for you. So now that we've looked at passive protection, which is preventative magic, it casts a bubble of protection over a person, a place, or a thing, right? And therefore it's something that needs to be done on a regular basis. The upkeep is there, and you don't just do it once and then leave it, with the exception of the witch bottle. The witch bottle you do just once. Everything else you would need to repeat every so often. Defensive magic, however, is not that way inclined. Defensive magic is active magic. It is the magic that you use when a situation has occurred and you need to deal with it directly. Okay, so it is much more active. It contains an element of domination and of exerting one's will in a dominating capacity. So for that reason, it can sometimes look and feel and even be confused as being a hex. So domination magic, hexes, they're very closely related. And defensive magic, active defensive magic, can actively bleed into that particular niche of magic, and you need to be okay with that. But defensive magic is something that is an extension of passive protection. It's when we have to escalate our strategy for protection, for instance. And so most often than not, when we're employed to use, when we're employed to use active defensive magic, it's because a situation has arisen and we haven't been prepared for that situation to arise. It's sort of come out of nowhere, or perhaps it's something that we could never have truly planned for. It's something that really doesn't fall under the category of preventative magic, and it's its own unique thing that's taken place. So we action that thing. Defensive magic is the magic of highly skilled witches. You need to be in a specific frame of mind to practice defensive magic, and that frame of mind exists beyond your level of tolerance. So we all have a level of tolerance. When our level of tolerance is reached, we go a bit cray-cray, right? Well, there is this little buffer zone in between I'm gonna lose it and you've just hit my limit. There is this little buffer zone where there is utmost clarity and cold precision. It's just a sliver there. And that's the mind space that you need to be in. That's the head space. That's the perspective that you need to be looking through in order to practice defensive magic, because in that case, clear perception and details are absolutely essential in order to stitch together a preventative defensive component that is suitable to you. And let me give you an example of this. Let's say you've taken a new job and you have a couple of bullies, a couple of gossipy bullies in the workplace. Okay, that's terrible in and of itself. So you may be the recipient. I can't speak today. You may be on the receiving end of that bullying behavior, right? Menacing behavior, if you will. But what's happening there is that those people have been permitted to behave in that way in the workplace, and that is a result of potentially management turning a blind eye or just not being on the ball when it comes to human services, human interactions within the workplace. There's so many components to consider that converge to create that unique situation and that form that behavior. So the form the road to that behavior. So when you're practicing protection magic, you need to address all of that. It's not just the behavior of the people, but what's causing them, what's permitting them to do that. In which case you would work on the people that are bullying you, absolutely. You would take away their opportunity to bully you in future by addressing the heart of the matter, which could be poor management, for instance, in which case you would work on the persons, one person singular or persons, plural, and you would work on the management or whatever structure is in place to allow that type of behavior to continue on. So it's far more involved, it's far more detailed, but it is something that is available to anyone should they need to utilize it. So defensive magic is for all people. Let me just say that. There will be some that will be better at defensive magic than others because of their tolerance levels. They have very low tolerance levels, and as such, they're very comfortable meeting with that buffer and that cold, calculated, vengeful type of state of mind. And it's believe it or not, it's a skill. It's a skill to marvel at, okay? My mother has that skill better than I do, and I'm a pretty feisty individual. My mother is a cold, calculated individual when she needs to be. And I have seen her deal with defensive magic in such a way that it's art. Like, she does it so well, it's absolutely beautiful to see. And I want my defensive magic to one day look like that to my children as well. But I don't want to get myself into that same personality state. So my level of tolerance is not exactly super low, but I am Latin and I am feisty, so it's about here. My father's level of tolerance is somewhere here. My husband, I've never seen him lose it in his life, so he's a very patient, very accepting type of person. But still, somewhere in there would be that limit for him, and someone would need to surpass that limit for him to truly lose it. And there are many out there like that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that you need to be in a particular headspace to practice defensive magic, and as such, that headspace for some isn't easy to get to, in which case there will be people who are perfect for practicing defensive magic, who are comfortable in that headspace, and there will be those who really, really, really need to use it as emergency situations only. And that's perfectly okay. There's no wrong and no right. If your level for tolerating crap is very, very high, then chances are defensive magic is something that may never even interest you because you're good, right? And that's totally okay, but it's still worth knowing some really great defensive magical techniques. And so when we're looking at defensive magic, we're looking at bindings, we're looking at freezer spells. We could even take it one step further and look at a bit of war water, hot foot powder. We can do talismans, we can do activations of crossroads and graveyard work, we can work with ancestors, we can work with poppets, we can work with sympathetic magic, we can work with, what's the name of it? Golems. There's so many things that you can utilize in defensive magic, and each of those options is perfect for dealing with a specific thing. My favorite is probably the simplest, and it's the one that I have listed in the blog post to accompany this video, and that is a freezer jar. But truth be told, I do like a good old binding. And for me, a good binding is a petition written to bind the behavior, very, very specifically written. I, Avalon Cameron, born 8th of May, blah, 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 live at this, wish to bind this, and list the situation. So this is the situation that I'm aiming to bind. And then you would sign that, make your petition, as I have previously instructed in a few other videos, and add to that petition a tag lock. Now, a tag lock is a personal item of the person, place, or thing that you are attempting to freeze, okay? So if you're freezing behavior, then you need a tag lock of a person, right? So hair, nails, blood, bodily fluid, these are the most direct tag locks. Photos, images, full name, date of birth, address, stuff like that. That will all link you to that person. You need as much of a tag lock as possible. Place that, fold that in with your petition. Remember that if we're freezing something, we're turning it anti-clockwise, right? We're writing it, then we're turning it anti-clockwise. We're folding it away from ourselves, not to ourselves, away from ourselves, anointing it as we go along. So you have that. You would get it to a point where you could roll it into a little, just like a little roll, right? So it doesn't have to be anything crazy. So just roll it a little bit until it's, you know, a nice little rolled up piece that looks a little bit like a cigarette or a cigar, for instance. Grab yourself either red, purple, or black natural thread and tie it. Anoint that thread with a domination oil or another oil that is suitable to that particular situation that you are looking to bind, and begin to coil and coil and coil. You need a lot of cord for this. Coil, 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 coil. Keep anointing it. Anoint it when it's done. Then grab yourself a dark box. It can be any type of box that has a lid on it. Grab yourself that dark box. Put a tourmaline crystal on top of it or around it somewhere. Put the lid on. Anoint the box with your oil and leave it in a very, very dark place. Wait for it to take effect. When it has finally taken effect, which could take, you know, however long, when it's held its effect for a long period of time, I would like to use the time period of like 3 or 6 months. Some people would work with a year. That's totally fine. When that happens, you can take it out and burn it. Okay? And that is one way of doing a binding. There are others. There are great jar spells. It's a beautiful playing field of magic that I believe it's very, very handy to know how to practice defensive magic. The example of defensive magic that I have in this blog post, I think it's the shoe. I think I've put in the shoe, yes. The shoe is a really, really great practical sort of old school folk magic one, and it's something to consider. I'm struggling with indigestion, sorry. But that is something to look at more closely. Did I say I had a jar spell for you? I might have a jar spell in there as well. Oh, I wrote this the other day and now I can't remember. Hopefully I've put in some great recipes. I definitely know that I put in the awesome witch's bottle recipe. That one's really interesting. That's a detailed little recipe if you guys want to utilize that. So that's something for you to consider. But I hope you've enjoyed this conversation, and it's a very big conversation to talk about, but I would like to know if you are understanding of what a defensive magic practice is, or the concept of defensive magic and passive protection magic. So I would like to know that you now know that there is a difference between the two, and that there is a time and a place to practice both types of magic. Now, there is no doubt about it. Defensive magic is heavier and it's more cunning. And that in itself lends itself to a particular type of personality. Natural passive protection magic lends itself to a particular type of personality as well. But let me tell you that those personalities can cross over from passive to active as often as they like. Active magic does not belong to just one type of personality or one type of practitioner. It belongs to everyone. Likewise, passive protection magic. So, you know, the beautiful thing about magic is that learn it all so that you can be good at it all, or at least have an understanding, because you never know when you're going to need it. Okay, so I just thought that I would give you a little, a nice little chat to go with this particular subject, and see how you go with it. Much love, many blessings. Any comments, questions? As soon as my eyesight is back to normal, I'll try and read and respond to any comments. But if you would like me to go into more detailed practices as far as protection magic, then please do let me know. Much love, many blessings. Mwah!